Mheshimiwa, but I am lucky. I am lucky because Ambassador Amina has been a senior colleague of mine for a very long time. When I served in Addis Ababa, she was in headquarters, and I had the privilege to serve as her principal secretary for the last 2 years. So in fact, a lot of the technical work that has been going on in the ministry, we've been driving under her direction. And I remember having a conversation with her last week to express my strong desire to continue drawing on our very wide experience internationally. So I don't see a loss. It is a challenge for me, but she is willing, and I am willing to continue to seek her counsel as a senior colleague in cabinet and as a distinguished diplomat internationally. I am also lucky because I am leading a team of colleagues. Most of the senior ambassadors at MFA are colleagues I have worked with. Most of the junior officers are colleagues we are trying to mentor together. So in a way, I am quite lucky to be continuing in my ministry because I'm not going to have to learn new ways and new people. My team is in place. And so I think I'm very lucky that way. Honorable Chepkong has asked a question around my thoughts and vision around asset acquisition and management. Cheboy, sorry, Mheshimiwa. Asset acquisition and management. We have, comparatively to our same size countries, we have very few assets globally. That is true, even if you are to compare us, for example, with Uganda. But the practice of countries has been to make a determination on the character of footprint you want across the globe. And I think that is what we've not done from a policy perspective. When I came into MFA, aware of this, having served in Addis and having struggled with the question of asset maintenance in Addis, it was very alive. And so we put together a team that has actually developed what we are calling the asset management policy that explains how we see the footprint in the future. And we are hoping that we can commence that discussion with Treasury, with Cabinet, because it requires actually a Cabinet approval and maybe even a parliamentary approval to say this is what we want to look like across the world in order to achieve the following objectives. And so we are at a very good place where we can very quickly finalize the asset management policy. We hope we can persuade Treasury to look at this as a stand-alone strategic intervention, because we cannot do it with the year-on development budget. It is very small. The development budget in MFA, in this financial year, we were allocated 2 billion. It was cut down to 250. We pleaded, we were added 300. So you cannot acquire assets with that kind of money. And we think from the experience of interior, from the experience of defense, you can actually do strategic interventions that help you to modernize and to have the right footprint across the globe in order to achieve the national interest as we have defined them nationally. So it is true, we require to have a plan. It needs to be medium to long term, and it is something that we have begun to work on. It is one of the things that I would hope that I can push forward. Meanwhile, we have already continued to acquire assets. Last year, we acquired New York. Now we have a home in New York. Our embassy there, our permanent representative mission there is acquired. We are going to be finalizing Pretoria in the next couple of months. We hope to open Somalia in less than 4 weeks today. We have finalized with Pakistan. So we are on the way, but it needs to be accelerated and it needs to be structured and planned. The resources in our missions. The resources in our missions has been a difficult one. Again, because whenever there is an austerity measure undertaken by Treasury, austerity measures, honorable members will know, target line items that are largely O and M. Travel, conferencing, training, things like that are O and M. Now, if you think about a mission, even a mission here, if honorable members receive an invite from a mission, it comes in the form of a card. Now, a card is part of the OM that goes.
Our mission was closed. Our ambassador disappeared. And we don't know why it was closed when another 172 UN missions in New York were open. And Kenya has been noted for over 53 years to have been voting for resolutions touching on liberation movements across the world. In fact, in specific reference to Cuba and Palestine. Is it because we were directed by the very aggressive US ambassador at the UN, Nikki Haley? Because after that vote, she sent an invite to a number of countries that disappeared to be hosted by President Trump. So is our foreign policy a captive, a hostage of US foreign policy at the UN? That I think your ambassador then and the current nominee for principal secretary, the media in Kenya contacted him. And we have information that he decided not to respond. So now that you're here, we need to know that position. What is our position? Number two, both the opposition and the ruling coalition, both NASA and Jubilee, in their manifestos, there is a complete absence of Kenya's foreign policy position. And we have contingent of troops formation at the AU and the AMISOM. But as we speak, and we have made sacrifices to the stability and peaceful transition of that government. But as we are here, there are serious proxy wars in Somalia between many countries, Turkey, UAE, Qatar, Ethiopia, and many. And Kenya is very silent. We are silent on what's happening in Burundi. We are silent on what is happening in South Sudan. And I remember Kenya was indicted about 10 days ago by the US that, you're not doing anything about the serious human rights violation happening in South Sudan by both parties. The Salva Kiir as a government and of course the opposition. Deaths, massacre. Kenya is very quiet. We have a very frosty relationship with Tanzania. I think ordinary Wanjiko is aware. We don't have a good relationship with Uganda and Rwanda. On the LAPSET project, the Northern Corridor, the pipeline, which was advanced stage, both Uganda and Rwanda, they pulled the carpet under Kenya, and the project went to Tanzania. So with all this, our foreign policy is dented. So if you are lucky and this House approves you as a minister, what are you going to do so that these various challenges that I have enumerated can be sorted out? And Kenyan position is known. You know, Kenya is a huge country, is an important country. And for example, the Jerusalem vote, it was very shameful. Our neighbors abstained. Uganda abstained, Rwanda abstained, and many African countries abstained. Many African countries voted for. Key countries like, among the 5 permanent members of the UN, I think 4 voted: China, Russia, France, UK. So Kenya, on a such a crucial date, and Kenya, which has been known a history, our president is known. His father was a freedom fighter. His contemporaries are the current president in Algeria, the Mandela. We are not like any other country. Our country, our current president, his father is a country that stood, trained, supported freedom fighters across the globe. on a very important day at the UN, I think it was very, very shameful that Kenyan position could not be known. And in that scenario, I'm sure you have an answer for us because you are the principal secretary. Why it also happens in Parliament when people don't want to vote. Some go to in the 10th Parliament. Key leaders used to go to the toilet when the House is taking a vote. In the 10th Parliament, it happened on the Constitution. So I hope at the corridors of the UN, you know, ambassadors that you have sent, and I'm happy now you have sent a very, very important and respectable diplomat to the UN. I hope the next vote he will not disappear. So what do you say to those two questions?
Well, you agree with me that that was a mouthful. I think maybe we'll rather give the nominee the opportunity to respond. It's a mouthful. I know all of you have questions, maybe as heavy as that one, but let's allow. It's an important. Those are very many issues that I think we need not to mix up with others.
Thank you, Honorable Duale, for those two questions. Let me begin with the question around what you perceive to be our diminishing role in the region. And let me begin by saying that on two occasions, which are very significant occasions, both the inauguration statement of President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013 and in 2017, he underscored the centrality of the region and Africa in his foreign policy, very clearly. In fact, when we define our policy, we say it is an Africa-centric policy. It's a Pan-African-driven policy. So there is no lack of clarity in the minds of the diplomats of this country that East Africa and the Horn of Africa region form the first concentric circle that defines, that creates the basis of our foreign policy. That is why, and we have seen this, there has been a lot of work done towards the integration process, towards the Northern Corridor process. Now, the relationship, specific relationship within the region, which is a region, I must say, that is characterized by a certain degree of fragility. Fragility, whether it is in terms of peace and security, fragility, whether it is in terms of ecology. You know, it is the region that year in, year out, we face famine, drought, and a lot of stress factors that impact on a lot of the relationships of what we do. But we have stood as an anchor state in that region. That is why we are in Somalia. That is why, in fact, we are in Sudan, South Sudan. That is why we have been really quite close in the process on Burundi. And we spoke quite loudly, even when the European Union was deciding to impose sanctions on Burundi, even claiming that they would stop paying the Burundian contingent in Somalia. We led the negotiations in the region that led to the rescinding of that decision because it would have weakened significantly the AMISOM troops on the ground. So the perception that we are actually folding back is not entirely true. But let me address the question of Tanzania, which I think is in everybody's mind. Now, if you think about even a family situation, we fight more with our sisters and brothers than long, father cousins. Firstly, because we are near each other. Secondly, because most of our interests, we have to negotiate them intensely. And that is what we have to do with Tanzania. And I think my team and the directorate of the EAC is quite aware that we have to engage with Tanzania, we have to engage with Uganda. You will know that in the last state visit by President Museveni, there were some fundamental discussions around the Northern Corridor project. Because even though there was some delay in the discussions previously, we have come to connect, and now there is a discussion about how do we seek resources together so that we can push the SGR and the LAPSET together, because it is for our mutual benefit. So what we need to do is just to increase the intensity of that discussion at various levels. Last week, the Department of International Trade was sitting with their Tanzanian counterparts, basically to speak around the non-tariff barriers that are dealing with us, the issues around trade, the issues, because we've discovered one thing, that both our trade portfolio with Tanzania is reducing both on our side and on their side. So we were asking the question last week, if both of our trade volumes are reducing, what is the problem? And we discovered that it was other countries, not even us, that are taking that part of the trade. And so we are saying, okay, can we sit down now and make sure that that volume does not go to other people? What do we need to do so that we can grow? So it's about sharing the understanding that we can both prosper together. And this is really what I hope if I am confirmed, to really push for a sound relationship around this region, because we cannot prosper without this region. Uganda is our largest trading partner. Tanzania is the second. Ethiopia stands with a huge market for all our trade and for export. So it is our duty, really, to nurse that relationship and to nurture it so that they are positive relationship on which we can build a sound foundation for our prosperity, for achieving the Big Four, for achieving Vision 2030 and so forth. So we are very aware of the need. Now, you will know that 2017 was a peculiar year in our country. We had 2 elections, long electioneering period. And because the election is important, even in terms of legitimizing the democratic credentials of this country, it is true we did not pay full attention to some of these issues. But now that that is past us, I think we are ready to accelerate the engagement at various levels. And I think we will still remain the anchor state, because the demand for our leadership is not just within the region, it is across the continent. Let me now turn to the Palestine, to the decision of the United States on transferring their mission from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. First, to indicate that really a decision of where a country hosts its a mission is a matter of negotiation between that country and the hosting country. So to that extent, that decision has to happen between the U.S. and Israel. But in relation to Palestine, because I think that is the question, the credentials of this country, we are forged on the anvil of self-determination as a country, and that is what defines us. In fact, when you look at our history in terms of whether it is Sahrawi, whether it is Namibia, whether it is Mozambique, whether it is Angola, we have been defined in terms of support for self-determination. That is why we are the ones who proposed the motion that admitted Sahrawi into the OAU. We are the ones who co-sponsored the Palestinian resolution to have observer status in the United Nations. So it is very, very clear where we stand. What, however, has been the practice in our foreign policy is that motions that deal with country-specific decisions like this one are not motions that we vote on. Ordinarily, it would be an abstention vote. On this day, as you rightly pointed out, Honorable Leader, our mission had actually closed for the holidays, and we had done that officially. We had done the notifications. You will know that this vote was called in less than 24 hours, and that is why we were not on the floor on that day. But on the matter of self-determination, I can assure this House that we stand completely unshaken. We have spoken loudly in the AU, in the UN, and that shall remain the case, because our identity is an identity of liberation, is an identity of self-determination.
Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, who doubled to be our speaker. Congratulations, Ambassador Juma. I want to ask 3 quick questions. 1, corruption in this country is short of being declared as a national disaster. Of course, it may be true or not true, but behind every smoke, there must be fire, whether the fire is big or small, whether the fire is on paper or on petrol. What is your position on misuse and misappropriation of public resources for individual gains? Number two, have you ever been mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigation? And if yes, please elaborate. The third one and the last one, there have been a problem of foreign beggars moving to our country, especially persons with disabilities, because of our good and conducive atmosphere for persons with disabilities in this country, because of the benefit that the government have given to persons with disability in this country. We have had a lot of migration of persons with disability from our neighboring countries. What will be your policy on that? Thank you very much.
Before Lunga Lunga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, congratulations, Ambassador, for being nominated. I must confess sincerely that the way you're handling the questions with content, I praise you. I would like to get a clarification because I represent a border sub-county whereby I believe the East African community integration has reached to the second stage of economic and social integration. But it's so unfortunate that our people, when they cross to the other side of Tanzania, are being mistreated, humiliated when they do their businesses. But at the same time, us as Kenyans, when they come to our country, we give them good services, we integrate with them properly. So I don't know whether, God willing, you go through this process. I would like to request directly from you, give it a priority to intervene. Thank you.
When? No, on record.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Madam Juma. My question: agriculture contributes a substantial portion of our GDP. Kenya exports agricultural products, especially coffee and tea. And yet, countries with which we have got negative balance of payments, like Canada, Russia, even China, if you go there, you can't find our tea there or our coffee. And yet we have got an international trade department that's supposed to market our products in those countries. What measures are you going to take when you become a CAS, which I believe you will, that you improve our exports to those countries that need our coffee and our tea? Two, you said that you have started talking to Tanzania on our relations. Are they going to pay back the Maasai herders whose cows they slaughtered about 2,000 cows and the 6,000 chicken? Thank you.
Sarah Korere.
Thank you, Chair. And congratulations, Ambassador Juma, for your nomination. Having listened to you doing your self-introduction and having gone through your CV, I have a feeling that, Ambassador, you shied away from telling us who you really are and some of the big achievements you've had going by your CV. And Ambassador, I want to tell you that in this country, when you are a woman, you should say what you've done, loud and clear. But again, Ambassador, I want to ask, Kenya has signed several international treaties and in regard to the status of women, children's rights and human rights. What will be your role and how are you going to play with other partners in implementing the domestication of such treaties? And number 2, Ambassador, having looked at your CV, what you achieved as a public servant, what is your vision of the foreign ministry and our status in regard to our foreign policy in the next 5 years?
I think you can respond to those ones. No, the other round will be all of you.
Thank you, honorable members. Let me begin with a question by Honorable Sankok on corruption. What is my view on corruption? It's a very simple and direct view that corruption is a criminal offense and it should be treated as such. It's really, it seems to me direct. On the neighbors that are coming in because of our conducive environment, I think this reminds us of the need to, as much as possible, focus on prosperity, regional prosperity. It is not going to be possible to achieve the benefits of our transformation alone in an environment that is fragile and poor and having all manner of problems. And that is why regional integration agenda becomes so fundamental. And as we are talking, even as we talk with our partners, we say, as we look at us, please think regionally. Please think regionally. This is a challenge we are having. In the northern border, we have more than 6,000 children actually coming to school, into our schools. So they are doing capitation, and all sorts of things. It is happening in northeastern, it is happening because we have better facilities. When we go to the universal health care, when we go to all this education, universal health care, good roads, good services, inevitably these become pull factors. So the only way to do it is to begin to think from a regional perspective. And this is what was driving the thinking around the cross-border initiative with southern Ethiopia, so that we look at these regions as communities that can prosper together. And I think this is the way we should think for all our border areas, because there is no country in the world that has managed to police its borders effectively. So I think the way to think about it is, how do we grow prosperous transboundary communities? Because also inevitably, these are brothers and sisters and relatives. So how do we bring prosperity to these people in a way that does not push the burden on one exchequer, on one side of the border? And that is the discussions we are having in Moyale. Those are the discussions we are having towards the Mandera region. Those must be the discussions that happen on the southern border with Tanzania, really, so that we can try and do that cross-border initiatives. This is important because the commitment of the president is that East Africans are like ourselves. They are our brothers and sisters, and he has actually pronounced a more privilege to the East African nationals. So it is so important that we try as much as possible to align our development agenda and priorities, particularly as they relate to our border communities. Let me now turn to Honorable Angwenyi's question on agriculture, which is very important. Important because if we are going to grow our prosperity in this country, then how we grow beneficiation in the agricultural sector particularly is critical. So part of the things that we are thinking through, and we are now looking at our export policy, which would actually be ready within the month or two, is to see, can we have import substitution policies that help us to get these people come in, so that our tea doesn't go out in bulk. We actually do the beneficiation here. And there's a lot of discussions that are going on. So we can have a Kenyan tea actually going to Russia as Kenyan tea, not going through somewhere else and being repackaged again as something else. So this is really the thinking that we are having. And as foreign affairs, thankfully, we are having the International Trade State Department now back in foreign affairs. That is very good in terms of the lines of responsibility, because the expectation now will be that every head of mission must be a commercial diplomat first and foremost. But we are also thinking about the possibility of growing the commercial units in the mission, so that there is a focus on promoting particularly the big four now. We look at who are the investors that can help us realize universal health care at the right value. Who are the investors that can help us to do beneficiation in manufacturing at the right value? And quickly, because we really don't have the benefit of time. Who are those that are going to help us do affordable housing? And what we are doing right now is actually mapping the globe, and we are having a good view of where these services and competencies and technologies can come from, so that we create the interface between those technologies, those opportunities, those resources, and the national priorities that we are having on the ground. And it's not just for tea and coffee, flowers, horticulture, and it can go on a dairy for West Africa, and vegetables. West Africa has a huge market that we are actually thinking about very closely in terms of growing the intra-Africa trade, which is still standing at 12% at this point. So there are great opportunities there, which would surpass the little unfortunate circumstances that we sometimes find ourselves when we just look inward. And we've already seen in the last 2 years, you have seen VW come back. Those were negotiations that we spearheaded. We have seen a number of other motor manufacturers willing actually to set base here for purposes of the East and the Central Africa market. So we are thinking broadly, and we are being guided by the clarity that has been pronounced in terms of the big four now. And this is an area we will obviously look to Parliament, even in terms of our footprint. We have very limited footprint in Eastern Europe, which is a big market. We have very limited footprint in West Africa. We have only one mission in Abuja, for the entire of the West Africa region, although it is almost 500 million plus in population. We have only a few missions in Northern Africa, another huge market. So even in terms of pushing forward that footprint, we will also be working, hopefully, with Parliament to do so. Now, will Tanzania compensate us for the cows and the chickens? I think there has been some discussions ongoing. There is a which is led by within the Interior on the Borders Commission, and there's a lot of discussions going on there. We are facilitating that as MFA to make sure that relationships be thorough and get better, as we move forward. But I do not have an answer about the compensation now, Mheshimiwa. Let me just speak a little bit about Mheshimiwa Korere's questions. One of the things that I did not declare is that I am also connected to Muranga by marriage. As part of me, I don't know that was one of the issues. Some of it is true that within the short period of time, I wouldn't say everything. But let me say one of the big things which I think has come my way in my experience. I had the rare opportunity to be one of the lead consultants that began thinking through about Kenya's foreign policy between 2005 and 2007. I think this is important because it was the time when, as a country, we were also reflecting on Vision 2030. We were reflecting on our place in the 21st century as a country. And I had a chance to really engage in that process, which led to the first published foreign policy that we have. So coming back as part of implementing that policy, I think it is with great sense of fulfillment that I can see where we came from and where we are going. But there's also been other achievements I would need to flag here. A range of achievements when I served as ambassador in Ethiopia. You will know probably that at that time we were in the Peace and Security Council. It was the time when we went into Somalia, and there was a lot of discussions that we led In fact, in 2010, when you try to have a discussion on Somalia, people would just say, you know, that is too difficult. Let's talk about something else. It was Kenya, really, and our leadership at the mission that engaged with the international community to bring focus back to Somalia. And we have been engaged since then. And actually, every time when there's a discussion on Somalia, it is not unusual that our leadership, our thought leadership is sought in terms of how the international community should deal with it. So we had a lot of work there in terms of the engagement of KDF, in terms of transition into AMISOM, in terms of the plan, the entire plan for Somalia. And we know that today large swaths of territory in Somalia have been liberated. We know the semblance of stability that is there is linked directly to the AMISOM presence and to the activities of our very professional KDF. So I look back to that with a great measure of pride. But let me come home. As PS in defense, but more specifically PS in interior, I think one of the big achievements I look back with great measure of pride are the institutional reforms that I spearheaded at that time. We came in when there was a big tension. It was not clear what was the role of national government, national administration to the lowest level, what was the role of our national government officials. I am proud to say that we led to a situation of clarifying that role, but more importantly, also providing the right assets for the national government. I am sure every of your chief rides a motor scooter, and anywhere I go in this country, everybody turns around and says, thank you, PS, we know you gave us the scooters. It wasn't my money, but we did that. We also did one thing which had never been done before. We provided resources to the lowest level, to the sub-chief level. They have an AIE. A chief is now able to have paper to write. A chief is now able to return a call from a Kenyan who is seeking their service, and it is something that has really improved their service provision to the people. I look at that with a great measure of pride. It's something that has gone on after myself, and I hope it will remain. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, gosh. Well, no, members, remember, we still have a long way to go. So let me get the member for Pokot South. Then let me just indicate how we are going to follow. Member for Pokot South, member for Ainab Koi, member for Kitui South. I think South is getting an unfair share. Member for Kamukunji, and member for Nakuru East. For the time being, if we hear something from Pokot South, maybe we can spare the entire Pokot. Let's hear from Honorable Kosing.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two practical questions, Madam CS. I'm calling you that and I'm praying that it's natural nobody can get a double jeopardy. I pray for you. Madam CS, two practical. One, it's come to our notice and knowledge that 6 biggest tribes enjoy 86% of public service jobs. And I'm sure you are within public service. Now, if you are confirmed very soon, what will you do about that? And this is very practical for our country. And we are not talking, and I'm not asking for small jobs, for example, at low cadres. I'm talking about directorship and above. How many, for example, Pogots are in foreign affairs from directorship and above? It's true. This is a practical question that will bring our country together. How many Turkanas, for example, are there? How many Dikos are there? And you know the whole country. Madam CS, what will you do about that? Two, I used to serve in a parliamentary committee, Mr. Speaker, last parliament, on defense and foreign relations. And there was this big idea or question or problem of our Kenyans being employed outside there and having a lot of problems. Some of them are killed, tortured, and so on. That was not happy for our country. Now, Madam, if you are appointed or confirmed, will you create a department? Because jobs for people of Kenya is good, whether they're in this country or outside this country. So what will you do about that to ensure that our Kenyans are safe, and also that there is hope that whenever they go, they are going to be seen by your ministry? Thank you, Chair.
In the order that I mentioned, Rachel Nyamai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair, I would like, first of all, to appreciate the fact that Monica is seated in front of this committee, and I thank the President for nominating her. I would like to, first of all, say that having perused her CV and having listened to her presenting herself, I think this is one of the ministries that one cannot be told to learn on the job, that one must have the experience, one must have the connections, and one must have the understanding, and I believe that listening to her, that she really has. I have one question to you, Monica, that now you're going to this ministry that, in our eyes, we think that it has been doing really, really well. And you understand the challenges. Every ministry has its own challenges. What is it that you would like to do the first day that, God willing, you are given the opportunity to sit there too? Is that having looked at your CV, you have risen from a junior officer in the office of the President, having worked internationally with various institutions, PS, and now you're going for the top, which is the CS. What kind of a person do you want to be? What kind of a role model are you going to be to the young girls who are looking upon you and young professionals within this ministry? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
William Chepkut.
Chair, Mr. Speaker, sir, may I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Monica Juma. I know indeed you are a proven diplomat. Having perused your CV, you are indeed qualified, suitable, and competent to deliver the services in the ministry. I have two questions to ask you. Brexit, the United Kingdom has deep historical and economic ties with Kenya. And you know very well they're exiting from European Union. I want you to move with speed since you are an authority in that field to make sure that our interest in terms of economic and security ties are taken care of. Two, and it is very important, the Migingo. I want the issue of Migingo. I want you to address the issue of Migingo with immediate effect. Make sure that Migingo is in Kenya. Third, and the last one, being an authority, Elgeyo Marakwet, Kenya Flospa, used to export a lot of minerals to China and Japan. Since you have global international networking, I want you to save and utilize your skills and knowledge to make sure that the markets of Flospa, you export the materials of Kenya Flospa abroad. Because it is going to be useless having been appointed by the President. We respect him a lot. And during the first session of our 12th Parliament, we were required by the President to protect the supremacy and the constitutional institutions, Cabinet Secretary included. I want you to deliver by making sure that Flospa has a market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and God bless you.
Member for Kamukunji.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is mostly focused on the new department. I think international trade has now come back. And I see that our diplomacy is Western-centric. that we look towards the West, when in fact things have changed. International global balance is now going towards the East. And more importantly, we are seeing the rise of countries like China in terms of economic, military, and political power. We're doing more of ourselves in Africa. African countries are rising up. How are you going to leverage that our economic diplomacy so that we trade more, we grow more, and in particularly, you have mentioned that we lack representation in West Africa and North Africa and Eastern Europe, and also some of the Middle Eastern countries. What are you going to do to be able to make sure that we become a major force instead of using, now at the moment we are surrounded by rough neighborhoods. We're using our hard power like in Somalia and in South Sudan. How are you going to use that soft power to be able to make Kenya a major trading and economic power in the region and in the world?
In the interest of time, may I find out whether there's a member who has an issue different from those other issues that have been raised?
Yes, you had given
so that I asked the nominee to just take note, bear with us, take note, and we'll give her a chance to respond to all of them. Yeah? Member for Muranga, but the nominee said she's connected to Muranga in a sense. So you declare your interest.
Chair, ulikuwa umesema mimi, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I want to declare my interest because the nominee is from my county by marriage. So I want to congratulate her. And Speaker, as I said in the morning, it's rarely that we get women to get into these positions, and especially the highest position of CS. So I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Basanda. And most likely, actually, when Sarah Korode mentioned about her achievement, it was not just about marriage. But I've also noticed, Chairman, that the women we have interviewed today or we have got taken through vetting, they have also done a lot of writing. And my challenge to her is to reach out to the girl child. I know there was a discussion about the boy child, but to mentor as many people as possible. You mentioned the former CS also mentored you in the process, and so I'm hoping you'll also mentor several missions. Mine, there are two issues. One, how do you prepare your staff members who work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and especially the ones who travel out of the country to serve and later to come back? I've noticed majority of them are young, bringing up young families, and sometimes they take their children out of the country, and after some time, which I don't know how many years you count, they come back. And that interferes with the schedule, with the upbringing, with the foundation of education of their children. Does the ministry have a heart for the children, and especially on the education? Secondly, is how do you protect the traders in Kenya? I have seen, especially you're saying we are moving to East Chinese. When our traders go to China and they start bringing items here in this country, we find the Chinese, majority of them, sneaking back to the country. And it's a shame to find some Chinese doing actually hawking in this nation. Who licensed them to do that? Are we really protecting our traders? And the biggest menace we have now, there are some casinos that are actually in almost every village being managed by these Chinese who have authorized them to come and trade here and who have given them those licenses. Are we really protecting our children and also our traders in this nation?
Okay, Member for Kikuyu, as we descend.
Thank you, Speaker. Chair. My chair is on something related to what the Honorable Sabina was asking, but I'll deviate from that and ask. One, Monica, you are very enthusiastic about the team that you're working with, the team that you have said is a team of colleagues. However, there are various complaints of people who have stagnated on their jobs within that team over a number of years. And I, of course, share the sentiments of those of my colleagues who are asking about communities that are marginalized. But there are also communities that are big in the public service but are marginalized. in the sense that they are saying that you're too many and therefore people tend to stagnate in their job groups for a long period. I would want to hear what you intend to do in terms of recognizing people from their years of service and also on merit from their service in the public service in the ministry. 2, you are being elevated from the position of Principal Secretary to Cabinet Secretary. In the past, the people who are served as principal secretaries and elevated to cabinet secretaries have the temptation to carry on the office of principal secretary to the office of cabinet secretary. I would want to hear what measures you would take to ensure that there is no conflict between you and Ambassador Macharia, the nominee for Principal Secretary in your ministry, such that you not take up your responsibilities as the accounting officer to your cabinet secretary's office. Lastly is on diaspora, young Kenyans who are living outside Kenya, and when their passports do expire, what will you do to facilitate a smooth renewal of their passports without being asked to produce identity cards and birth certificates, documents that they usually do not carry with them to the countries where they are, but they're always being asked for these documents for renewal. How can you work with the immigration department to ensure that these young Kenyans are not being harassed in their host countries because their passports have expired?
Of course, those who have not renounced their citizenship. Member for Nakuru East.
Actually, Asante Speaker, just on an addition to what Ichonga was just saying, we've had an opportunity as members of parliament. Whenever we visit abroad, we find so many Kenyans who are not, legally in those countries. And they would want that their legality to get some identification and get passports and be allowed to. So what are you doing to that extent? And the last one, Speaker, now that you have said about those who have not denounced their citizenship, this issue of Miguna out there, every Kenyan is not very certain as to why the press are saying he was recalled because he has some criminal cases in Canada, or he renounced, and those things. Is it possible that you can be able to clear and say his deportation, so that Kenyans can know, because there is a lot of distortion by the media and politics going around the deportation of Miguna. Maybe you could be able to give us an insight as to how he was taken back.
Of course, you have to navigate very carefully so as not to find yourself being invited as a witness by some courts. Member for now Pokot as a whole, Honorable Lillian Tomitom.
Thank you, Chair. Let me congratulate Madam Ambassador for that position. I have 2 questions. One, I want to ask about youth and unemployment. You know very well that this is a very big problem in this nation. And on behalf of the youth of this nation, I want to say that it has been a very long-term problem. And most of the youth of this country have been compelled to go out and look for jobs in some countries which have some unique social cultural practices. This has actually affected the youths of this nation in those particular countries. An example being Saudi Arabia. Most of our youths have been suffering working in those countries, and considering the fact that their social cultural practices clash with our own in this nation. So as a result, you realize that the youths of this nation have been suffering, have been working under stress, and some of them have even been made slaves in their places of work. So I want to ask Madam Ambassador to kindly convince this panel on how you are going to assist those Kenyans who are out of this nation and suffering on the same. Secondly, I want to ask Madam, how are you going to work with these other ministries, like the Ministry of Gender, Youth, and Social Services, to make sure that employment for the youth in this nation is improved? And finally, I want to ask about the 2/3 gender rule. As a woman leader, you've risen to that position, and I want to say that we really bank on your contribution to make sure that we attain the 2/3 gender rule in this nation. Therefore, what effort are you going to inject into this particular 2/3 gender rule so that as a nation we attain it, and for the betterment and development of this nation, especially the women? Thank you.
Well, I personally determined that you'll be able to respond to all those questions. So don't ask how I arrived at that conclusion. But of course, let us also bear in mind that she's been nominated to the position of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, so that some of these things, if we were in the plenary, remember the rule on relevance, it would have applied very seriously to many of the questions. But nevertheless, since they have been raised, and I've determined that you are in a position to respond, over to you.
Thank you, Chair and honorable members. Let me begin with the Honorable Posing, who asked two practical questions. The first was on the face of Kenya, I guess, and what we are doing or we will be doing in MFA. Let me just begin by saying that in the last 2 years that I've been at MFA, we have had 2 cohorts of cadets coming through, a total of 89 of them. And together with the teams that have helped the PSC to recruit, we have been very careful to ensure that there is a reflection of the face of Kenya. And that's what we are doing as part of the statutory requirement for demonstration of diversity across. Now, in fact, it is not entirely the case that in MFA there is this level of skewness that has been explained here of 86%. It is not like that at all. But it is a statutory requirement, and I think this will be at the back of our minds even when we are doing the deployments going forward. So it is a commitment that I can give. We are required to observe, and we shall endeavor to do so. Now, let me focus on the question of seeking employment outside the country. It is true, we have about 3 million Kenyans outside of our country, across the world, as far as Iceland, actually. So we are quite migratory, so to speak. It is also true that these are people of various categories. And on the whole, where we have Kenyans that have gone in as professionals, we have no problem. We have Kenyans in NASA, the space station. We have Kenyans in IT industries in New Delhi and everywhere else. We have them everywhere. And where Kenyans have gone and entered the labor market with professional competencies, with qualifications, we have hardly had any challenge. The big challenge has been largely with Kenyans that are unskilled. And this has been pronounced particularly in the Middle East, where there is a high demand for unskilled labor. The problem has been that the movement of Kenyans has not been aligned to the policy structures of protection. So we've not had for a long time policies to protect or to guide the movement of Kenyans. Remember, the Constitution guarantees everyone who is over 18 the right to a passport. So you cannot deny any Kenyan a right to a passport. And a lot of people have been recruiting them in a clandestine manner. But having recognized that, and because of the challenge that came with it, there has been a lot of work in the last 3 years, particularly within the Ministry of Labor, which is the lead ministry, on creating a vetting process for agencies. And we are also within MFA, have opened labor attaches in some of these countries. We have negotiated and are continuing to negotiate the right agreement of protection. And we have looked to various countries for lessons. For example, the Philippines, because there's a large population of the Philippines. Up to about 10% of their population is actually outside, and some of it in semi-skilled sectors, but they are very well protected. So we are looking at them, we are looking at Indonesia, we are looking at several other countries to try and borrow the right framework to protect our citizens, even if they are not skilled when they go out. So we hope that the agreements we are negotiating, and a number of them have been signed with, I think, Saudi and some other countries, but we are continuing in that negotiation to make sure we protect Kenyans when they go back. Now, of course, where Kenyans have had difficulties, we have tried very much as MFA, because even though labor is the lead ministry, when there is a problem, the first point of contact are the missions. So we get involved. In the last 1 year alone, we have brought home about 707 Kenyans that have been in distress from across the world. So we respond. We do not have a lot of resources, but we do respond whenever there is a crisis. And that ranges from India, from Malaysia, from name it. We have brought people from everywhere, from Yemen, from South Sudan, from a number of places. And we will continue to do so because there's a requirement to protect every Kenyan wherever they are. Now, let me thank Mheshimiwa Nyamai and the other Waheshimiwas that have expressed confidence in my competence. And let me just indicate what in my mind do I think is my first task. You will know that the president has nominated about 8 former ministers to represent him abroad. And so I think the first task really is to prepare those ministers, and we have actually begun to do so before they take up their vetting, but also before they take up their deployment in the various countries of responsibility. But the other immediate thing, we have been looking in MFA at review of the diplomatic trends and developments across the world. And the reason we have been doing that is because we realize that there are a number of unusual happenings, whether it is the rising of China, whether it is the situation of narrow nationalisms in Europe and elsewhere, and we understand that we must realign ourselves. So we have been going through that process. And so my almost immediate task, I think, is to bring our thinking, or to share this thinking with a new team. And I have to say, if we are all approved, I think MFA will be having a very strong and able team. And I really look forward to working with all of them if approved. And I want to bring the review of the diplomatic environment to the top team, but also to share it so that we can get guidance of the president before we begin to engage with our missions, with our headquarters, in how we are going to map out our diplomatic engagement across the world. So for me, this is the most immediate task after my approval as CS Foreign Affairs. Now, in terms of what kind of a person, of a role model I would wish to be known or remembered for, I think the first one is really to be remembered as a professional, first and foremost, as a competent of public servant, as a person that stays the course. My history, my working experience is really attests to, I think, an individual that stays the course, but most importantly, that goes through a learning process. Every time, there is no time that I don't find myself learning. And so this is the kind of team, and particularly for MFA, you cannot stop learning because every situation you engage with is fluid. So it keeps throwing in new factors and new scenarios that you must learn how to deal with and how to leverage. Mheshimiwa Chepkuto, again, thank you very much for those kind words. We've been looking at Brexit very closely. And in fact, about 3 weeks ago, the Secretary for International Development was here, and we spent 2 days with her and her team, together with our team, including CS Rotich and many other CSs, to reflect on the meaning of Brexit for ourselves. Now, you probably know that the balance of trade with the UK is in our favor, which is one of the unique things. And we want to continue growing that trade. We want to continue to make sure that the exit of Britain, which was our champion actually in the EU, does not affect our market with the EU. So it is something we are looking at very closely. And within MFA, in fact, we have organized a symposium on the implications of Brexit for us, just to begin thinking and cutting through the strategies and the activities that we need to engage with. So it is something that we are looking at very closely because the implications are big. The UK is important not just for the trade, but also for its voice in the international multilateral arena. And so it is a country we would want to keep on our side in spite of Brexit and so forth. Migingo issue, I think, speaks to the bigger issue of territorial integrity. Within our diplomacy, the maintenance of our territorial integrity is our number one mandate. And that goes for Migingo, it goes for any other territory that is called the Republic of Kenya. So we are au fait and very aware of the various areas that of the need and the imperative of our diplomacy to protect our territorial integrity in its totality. FLOSPA, I agree with you. I think the task here for us at MFA is to work closely with the Ministry of Mining, but more importantly also in the mapping of the world. We've been looking at the various places where we can draw either investment or where we can expand our market and guarantee that market access for our product, including the FLOSPA. So I think what you have given us is a challenge that I can only promise we will do our best to achieve, and we can continue following through as we interact between yourself, Mheshimiwa, and MFA. Honorable member of Kamkunji has spoken to the question of international trade and then the notion that we have been Western-centric. In fact, if you look at the commentaries on Kenya's foreign policy in the last 5 years, you will see an argument that we are looking east. There will be an argument that we are looking east. I think the right position is that we are looking for opportunities and minimizing risks. That is the right framing of it. We are keeping our old friends, but we are looking for new friends that can help us realize our interest for prosperity of our people. So we will engage with those traditional partners, but we will open up new markets and new partnerships. And that is what we've been doing. That is why, as I indicated a while back, we are looking at new markets, Eastern European markets. We are looking at the Southeast Asia very closely, and in the last couple of years, we have opened quite a number of missions there. We are thinking about expanding into some of the areas, including opening a number of consular generals within China itself because of the portfolio of trade and investment that is coming out of that country. And so it is not entirely correct to assume that we are Western centric. It is not exactly true. What we can say is that we are growing, we are anticipating growing our country, and we will grow it across the globe, whether it is East, West, or Latin America, in fact, where we have opened a mission in Havana that is looking at the Caribbean, but where that footprint needs to expand because there's a lot of lessons and experience that we can share with Latin America. The idea is really to grow our competitiveness globally. That is the idea, and there are opportunities across everywhere. In doing so, we've been reflecting on the use of soft power, particularly within our region and the continent. And members will know that in our budget, we have some resources that is acting as a technical fund. That technical fund is conceived to grow over time, to really become the development arm of our foreign policy as the soft power. And we have used it well in relation to our neighborhood, in terms of doing trade exhibitions, in terms of promoting our trade to go in, our goods to go into certain countries. But it is an area that needs to grow, because there is also demand for us to show leadership on the region. And soft power is the way to go about it, really, rather than hard power. Usually it is difficult to sustain. For Sabina Chege, I take the counsel to not just to give back, because I think modeling, providing example for younger people, it's a call of giving back, and I take that. We in deployment try as much as possible not to disrupt children's school life, so that when we are deploying, we actually wait for the school year. So there's a lot of sensitivity. And you know, sometimes we will even extend the stay to make sure our child finishes a year. So it is something that we are very sensitive to, particularly when there are children going to school or transitioning from one school curricula to another one. And it is something we intend to do, particularly because we are having younger and younger diplomats. So we are having parents that are diplomats, and I think it is very important to support them so that they can give you their best. It is the same thing when you have single parents. You know, the support system, it's something that we are thinking about. And I think in MFA, one of the units I hope I would create, if confirmed, is really a robust welfare unit. You know, it is a very stressful environment. It places a lot of stress on the family, and I think it is one that requires a big support system. And that might even be thinking, how do you deploy single parents that have small children, so that you really don't deploy somebody and make them completely dysfunctional in the missions and therefore not effective to work. Honorable Ishungwa has spoken, and I think this dovetails well, the whole question about welfare and career progression. I have to admit to this committee that I think, having come from DPM and institution building, OD, and that experience, that our career development in MFA is not super, you know, and it is something that needs some working, so that you can create a career path of foreign service officers that is clear, that is predictable, and that is merit-driven. So that is something that I hope that we can begin that process and actually clarify it. There are many models, you know, of foreign service career development frameworks that we can borrow from, and we intend to do so. Finally, do I want to become a PS and CS? No. The CS job is a very tough one, I have to say. So I'm glad I have had that cut, you know. In my conception, my role as a CS will really be a vision carrier, to help the ministry scan the globe on a constant basis so that we can deploy appropriately, and so that we can take the opportunities and at all the times minimize any risk to those opportunities. So that is the way I see it, as a strategy setter, as with very good deputies, I think, in the form of Chris Kipto and Macharia Kamau. I think I'm very, very well placed to deploy delegation without a lot of trouble. So I am not wishing to be an accounting officer after this approval. Diaspora and renewal of documentation. This is a function that is performed by the Ministry of deals with the immigration, but they do it within the ambit of foreign affairs. So what we do is to try really to make that process smooth and as painless as possible. But there are requirements within immigration that must be adhered to, because if they are not adhered to, it actually even affects the services we can access globally. Because if, for example, our passports are deemed to be unfit and unsafe, then it has a domino effect on how the Kenyan passport is treated globally. So really there is a whole requirements of immigration, and the idea is to make sure that those requirements do not become a burden to Kenyans, because they're supposed to be easy to get, and even if Kenyans are in other countries and they are illegal, you know, we know countries that have departments that take care of their illegal citizens in other nations. So you still have a duty to take care of a Kenyan wherever they are. So the idea is really to find mechanisms to make sure that they can regularize their status if it is possible, and that they do not have difficulties living in those countries as Kenyans. So it is something that we would encourage Kenyans as much as possible not to be illegal immigrants. It's a painful situation, but we still have the obligation to take care of every Kenyan across the globe, and that is why in MFA we have an entire directorate that is dedicated to diaspora and consular affairs. This is all they do every day to make sure that Kenyans anywhere can access services. We also encourage Kenyans, because in many times we don't know who is where unless they make themselves known by the missions. We encourage them to register with the missions, irrespective of their status, so that we can know where they are at all times. So this is what the directorate does. What I can give assurances here is that we intend to, as much as possible, improve the capacity of that directorate so that all Kenyans know that they can access services and protection from their country. Finally, Chair, on the deportation. Again, the deportation is within the ambit of the Ministry of Interior, as I'm sure everybody knows. But let me say something about foreign nationals in other countries. From a diplomatic etiquette point of view, foreigners are not expected to partake in political affairs of other countries. That is the fundamental principle. And therefore, anybody that is not a Kenyan, that is why foreigners don't vote. They cannot determine the social contract of citizens and their leadership. That is why they are not allowed to do political campaigns. And that is why even when we host people as refugees, the first thing they must declare is that they will not undertake political activities in a friendly nation. So I think as a matter of principle, that is where I want to rest it. Finally, and I think I've answered this on youth and employment, I think we have a duty to do everything as MFA to make sure we grow the capacity of our country to employ Kenyans, and also we provide opportunities for Kenyans to seek employment outside in protected environments where they are protected and where they live in dignity. I thank you, Chair.
Very well. I believe now most members who needed to ask questions have asked. My business was to ensure that everybody had a chance. And those that did not ask is because they found that what they needed to ask had already been asked by others and responded to. Therefore, Ambassador Monica Juma, we wish to thank you for being able to stay with us. We thought we were going to take less than 1 hour, but I think members got very interested in the way you are responding to their questions, and I'm sure they agree. They now understand why it is that I said you will be able to respond to all the questions, because we noticed from the beginning that you are able to respond and you are to the point. Thank you very much. Of course, the committee will be retreating maybe at the weekend to go and consider the various responses. We've looked at, of course, we've filled the questionnaire. We've looked at it, and it's also good for me to announce the country again. I'm not always able to remember before the start that we have not received anybody who has made representations one or other in keeping with the provisions of Section 9, Section 6, Subsection 9 of the Public Appointment Parliamentary Approval Act by way of any affidavit. And firstly, mentioning or expressing themselves on suitability or otherwise of Ambassador Monica Juma. So it's for that reason that we have not read out anything. Nobody has written to us anything that we could draw your attention to. Unless you wish to say something by way of a parting shot. I think I've sat for too long now. I need to have a glass or bottle of water. Ambassador Monica.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable members, I just want to express my gratitude once again for a session that has been both enriching to myself as well, and to express my readiness to continue engaging with Parliament as one of the publics, hopefully after my approval, in taking Kenya to the next level of its diplomatic history. I thank you, sir.
Very well, we release you, but remember to carry the original CV. Members remain for a short while. But yes. Yeah, we have to. Yes.
So we have to give ourselves, if it is half an hour, 3:15.